Okay.
Hi, welcome to another Google Hangout. Today we have Rebecca and Thomas. Rebecca is in the States. Hi, Rebecca.
Hi, Marlen. Hi, Thomas.
And we have
Hi,
Thomas.
Marlen. Hi,
He is
Rebecca.
in Taiwan. Right.
Yes.
So we will be discussing the same subject that we had in our previous Hangout, which is the failure within the Namibian big project, Basic Income Grant Project, and how today we are going to be focusing on how would it be made functional within the application of the model that we are presenting, which is a living income guaranteed. So the first point that we're going to be looking at is the infrastructure of Namibia and the resources. So Rebecca, would you like to share with us the research you've done?
Well, we all know they have diamonds and they have uranium and copper and manganese and marble and zinc, and I believe that silver is a byproduct of nickel and zinc, and they have tungsten. And what has also recently been discovered is a massive freshwater aquifer in the northern part of Namibia. It's pretty deep down in the ground, and from what I read, it's about 10,000 years old. And what's special about this is that the water is supposedly pure because it's been separate from the surface for so long, so it has as water goes, a higher value. And there's enough water there. The numbers are based on how much water Namibia has used to meet Namibia's needs for 400 years. So it's just a country with extensive resources.
Exactly. And the question would be, what has happened to those resources that the people are living in poverty and have no kind of benefit out of it?
Yeah, the average salary is what, 8,000 Namibian dollars, which is just nothing.
And they don't even have like this stable minimum salary. It all depends on what the corporations or the state decides to give to the people. And that's what you get in the research of the minimum salaries around the world, which also places out the situation of how has the people allowed this as well.
Yeah, there's a what is it, the NIC, or there's a ratio that they use to show income disparity, which I think is based on relatives, but it's extremely high in Namibia.
Exactly. Well, in relation to, for example, the diamonds, which is mostly like the majority of what they export, we know that it is an absolutely enslaving type of industry. But first of all, Thomas, do you have something to add on to what we were discussing?
Yeah, I don't think the people have any choice in the matter. I think it's all a question of the multinational corporations, the World Bank, the cronies, that force this on to the people, and standard practice been going on in Africa for a long time.
So in relation to, for example, the application of the living income guaranteed, we are proposing that the resources are nationalized, which would mean that the people would not get the current sense that they get for example, working in a mine to get the diamonds that are sold for thousands or millions of dollars. Well, how can we then, for example, go talking about all of these resources and how that could be directed to benefit the people?
Well, you take the values that the resources earn, that's changed into money, the energy in money, and you give it to the people, and you also have to educate the people so that you create a self-sustaining area. You empower the people through educating them and also working with them to create an environment that's self-sustaining. And not just have Namibia be this one-dimensional commodity for the world. You respect the earth, and you, on every point of the earth, you create a situation where life is self-sustaining and respected. And even right now, someone suggested that, or I was thinking that the whole administrative level of Namibia needs to really realize that when the multinationals pull out, when the extraction has been done and that 10,000-year-old water is gone, that what's left? You have to really use your common sense and realize, wait a minute, we have to stop. We have to self-empower the people, educate the people to direct themselves. And as last week we talked about, not leave them, with the brains of a person with a heart attack, and not just think, just at face value, these people that have been living in lack for so long just are happy to get this simplistic little thing that really does nothing for them, and nothing for the land, and nothing for the earth, because it's all part of us.
Exactly. Thomas, do you have something to add?
Well, I agree. It's all a question of making it self-sustaining. Each country should be self-sustaining, and that's one of the points I'd like to make regarding BIG, or the Living Income Grant, is that as far as we're talking about this Namibian project, it's got to be done in a country that is able to be self-sustaining. So it's not going to just work, as I see it, just being applied to a village. It's got to be a self-sustaining, the whole country unto which it's applied. And educating the people is key. So it's a long-term process. It can't just be done over the course of a year and say, oh, it didn't work. We weren't able to, the economy didn't improve. There are a lot of points here that the academics will look at, which is totally missing the point. When they look at failure, they ask basically, did the economy grow? Instead of who did they help? Did they save lives? Did they save children? Did they save mothers? So their definition of what works and what is a failure are completely different to what the people on the ground, for example, would say what is a success and what is a failure. So I think it's got to be a long-term project and implemented from within, with the backing of the people. It's basically just common sense. Most definitely, we can use natural resources sustainably to maintain the cycle, the economic cycle, so to speak, that the money of big will get going. It's kind of like the human body and the blood circulating, the economy, right, and the blood circulating through it. A country's economy, from the perspective of most economists, requires constant growth, which is just consumption, but not really looking at the health of all the organs, the circulatory factors of the total body. So instead of looking at it as an economy, we look at it as an ecosystem, just like a body, human body of life. And we see that, for example, in many third world countries, in many impoverished countries, it looks dead. It's dead or dying. It's dying. And really, big is kind of like injecting fresh blood, money into that. But by the same token, we have to look at it as an ecosystem that's got to be nurtured back to health. So it's getting the blood, the money, to flow to the vital organs. And I'll call it economy, but it shouldn't be that. I'd say it should be an ecosystem. Getting the money to flow to the vital organs, so that you can nurse it back to health. And the nursing it back to health part includes step by step raising the entire country kind of at the same levels, including education, letting them know that that this big is a long-term project, a project that's going to stay. For example,
And
they talk about,
also within this, also we have to look at the point that Rebecca was mentioning is very important, that we don't have to look at Namibia, for example, as an asset, because we know that that implementation of the big project had other interests behind. And it was kind of like this nice, good deed, but in essence, we can look at all the resources and we surely use all of them. And we have to look in a worldwide perspective, because even also only changing that one single environment, we have to consider the whole world. So that's why we also say that living income guaranteed has to be implemented in the whole world, or else it will just become just another little bubble that kind of works, but the moment that it creates this kind of interaction which comes with trade and so forth, it would have to inevitably be balanced out in other countries in the world. So we're talking about the education process, but we have to specify what kind of education, because it's not certainly not the current education system that we have now, and that's what we are focusing on also as the Equal Life Foundation. So Rebecca, do you have any input on that educational process?
Well, one thing to do, there are traditions that people have developed over generations living there on the land. For example, there may be ways that they prepare roots to plants and things that they do locally on the ground, even within the different regions in Namibia, where you've got a desert area that I understand has heavy fog banks. And I know, so this combination of using traditional local food preparation practices that are healthy for the people. I mean, to draw an analogy, I know that in America, when the colonists came to America, the Europeans, they were amazed at how healthy the American Indians were. So it's to take the traditions that are good of the local regional peoples and to work with those on the ground. And also, so it would be good to go and live with the people to understand how they work, and also perhaps bring in some modern technology. There are many things that have been developed, like water filters and what is it, the energy using the sun and wind power and all kinds of things like that, to improve the communities with modern technology, but also keep what is good, keep some of the traditions that use the native plants, and develop these with the people. And also, a lot of agriculture could probably be developed in Namibia, and also not to always have just monocultures for big corporations, to create some of these designs they have now where they use native plants, they plant these gardens with all this variety, and you work with what's there. Because then you are not only sustaining the people, but you're sustaining the animals that are adapted to that kind of plant life, and also to keep those plants. And yeah, so you allow the people to use some of what they know, and you also help them create more efficient ways to deal with what's there. So it's a nice balance of modern science and tradition, to not throw things out that have proven over time to be good for the people.
And also removing the restrictions, because there are restrictions for people to not have their own places to develop agriculture, to not have proper living conditions, because they are relegated to the outside of the centers where actual life can be, have proper soil to grow your food. That doesn't exist. People are being refrained from that. So also, living income guaranteed doesn't only mean handing out money to people and expecting things to just work, because they only get to be leveled out and remaining in that status quo that is certainly not supportive. So it is a restoration process. Also, the mining of the diamonds has left major holes on the earth, and also the people that are currently being enslaved on that. That has to be also placed, gotten to a halt, certainly understand, well, how is it supporting really life? Is a diamond really worth that kind of lifestyle? Or how can we, create more sustainable ways of generating this money that would become the living income guaranteed? But we get to the question, and this goes for Thomas, in relation to how would the elite benefit from this, or how can we convince them of implementing this way of living?
In terms of their definitions of benefit, I would say many of them will never be convinced. And this is where we have to understand that it's key to have the backing of the people, have the backing of the people in the political process. The elite fear losing their power and control. Not all of them, but many of them fear losing their power and control. Let's say that specifically politicians. And this is where I see us having some of the biggest obstacles to the living income guarantee is within the political process pertaining to the politicians who are already in power. Instead of trying to convince the ones that would maintain their power and control for greed and concern for only themselves, I would say focus on the people, focus our assets on convincing the people, empowering the people to understand that they are able to stand up and take responsibility for their situations. It's a long-term process, but I don't see convincing the need. I see the need. If it was possible, yeah, sure, I'd say, okay, spend some assets, spend some time convincing a few people, a few elites at the very top who currently control the masses, own, what is it, 80% of the resource, 80% of the money in Namibia. So focusing our assets on convincing a few in power and control who are afraid to give up that power and control unto the people, I would say it's basically a waste of time. I don't see them doing it. I would rather spend the time focusing on the people in need, empowering them to stand up and start taking responsibility. Peaceful within the current political processes that are available, and they're there. And they're there. It requires that people understand, people on the ground understand the political process and convey this information unto the people. So that's the process that I focus on. I don't see it happening for the most part. You might get a small percentage of the elites convinced, but the majority, of course, in public, they may support it. But behind the scenes, and this is why often a lot of these projects, these test projects, do indeed fail. Behind the scenes, they're chopping the legs out from under the projects.
Rebecca, do you have something to add?
Well, there really has to be a kind of paradigm shift from understanding that what profit is doing, especially in Africa, is turning countries into concession stands, and that what has to be realized is that we have to take care of the earth. I mean, the surface of the earth is like the skin of the organ of the earth, and it has to be a structure has to be created that supports this in all common sense. I mean, we don't have time to mess around anymore, and that's just absolutely what needs to be done. These people can be educated. This country can be organized in a way that's self-sustaining. And the only thing that will stop it from happening is the belief that it can't be done.
Exactly. And also in relation to the self-responsibility, we can see that it is up to us, really, all the people. That's why we promote this information, we share it, because it is only within the people, as Thomas was explaining. It's going to be very hard, and it's speaking like to dead wood if you are going to the politician and asking them to implement this, because it's going against their interests. So we have to really create this from the starting point of the people. So that would be like
isn't it, well, one of the things that the Living Income Grant proposes is that you have the basic income, and then if you work, the salary is doubled. So built into the structure of the Living Income Guarantee is the incentive to work. So for those, there's a basic income given, a living wage, a living income guarantee for people, for teachers and people that are retired and are, you know, that can't work. But that wage is doubled for those if you go out and you work. So that gives some incentive for people to go out and develop the land. So you really, one thing that's so great about Living Income Guarantee is that built into the structure of it is supporting everyone and also incentive to work.
Thomas?
Yes, I agree with that. And one thing I'd like to point out also, there's one thing in that report that I did agree with, that the supposed academic wrote, and that's that the, whatever you call it, the living income grant, basic income grant, living income guarantee, each location, each country in which this is instituted, their needs really need to be met. For example, a country like Switzerland, a country like Taiwan, let's take Taiwan, that could actually benefit quite a lot from such a program. Does not require so much of a, does not require, for example, that living income. Majority of people don't require so much. All they require is just a little bit additional. Most of the people might require just a little additional. So each country that we employ this has to be looked at in almost entirely separate scenario as to what is actually required. Especially for countries that have national resources and stuff, we look at these countries and say, okay, they have national resources. We say, how much of the income from these national resources in a sustainable way can continually go into this, into the living income, also considering the amount that's going to be returning, for example, every month. And it's going to take some mathematical calculations and some trial and error to figure out the right balance. So it's got to be flexible also. And a key here is in looking at, for example, the savings rate. The savings rate is actually a gauge of fear of the future. When we talk about higher savings rate as being an indication of success, I call that an indication of failure. If you institute a basic income grant that's supposedly going to be for life, and all of a sudden the savings rate starts skyrocketing, that would indicate a lack of trust on the people. We're not really looking for savings. What we want is that currency to be flowing through all parts of the economy. So it's going to require flexibility too, but with an understanding of commitment, basically, by the government power, and that's. Go ahead.
That's really a good point, to realize that it's really in developing a planet that's self-sustaining, it's going to be a process and it needs time. So everything has to be able to change and move and balance and find its way. So it's a process, but we have to do it.
Yes, we have to direct it. And, well, the time is now up. Would you like to add something to conclude this hangout, either of you?
Just again, let's recap what I said. It's not going to be up to the elite. If we leave it up to the elite, sure, there's a small percentage of them which, you know, truly perhaps are altruistic and would care to see this world be a better place. But if we leave it up to the elite, we're not going to get anywhere. We, the people that do care, require to work with people in need, assisting them to stand up and take responsibility for themselves, understanding that the power is theirs. It's just a question of getting them to stand up and take it back, take the steps that are required to place our representatives, the representatives that are standing for what is best for all, in political positions, governmental positions, the offices in which we're able to make the decisions and rely no more on the altruism of the elite.
Okay, we have a comment from Joku. Currency must function like a current. It has to flow equally. The presence of savings is, in a way, a hedge for self-interest within the principle of competition. And I may also add of fear, because you're simply believing that you have to accumulate, which is the way of the world. You accumulate and you don't allow the money to flow, the blood to flow, to generate life and enable it to continue. So thanks for the comment, Joe. Rebecca, would you like to conclude with something?
It's really changing the form of the current system that we have into one that flows. Because the one we have now is a lot of stops in it, and things go in one direction and create extremes that are unacceptable. So it's time for a system change.
Yes, this is the way to regenerate the economy within the consideration of what is a living condition that is best for all, which means we have to educate people, we have to get into the country, so the people from the country has to essentially understand that they have to get themselves in gear to become politically active to promote this solution, which is the living income guaranteed, understanding that it is a sustainable educational process that also leads to an economy that is not based on the current system, but it has to be changed to be made sustainable as in physical relationships, wherein we understand how to regenerate the earth, empower the people, and essentially elevate the quality of living everywhere in the world, essentially. So it's not only in Namibia, but also everywhere in the world.
It's to realize that we've been dumbed down and that self-empowerment is a process and we walk it.
Exactly. Okay, guys, so this is it for this hangout. Thank you very much for participating, and we'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.